my name is Aijing and today I really wanted to talk about the new Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana Holiday Palette. I'm going to get into swatches, packaging, pricing, details, comparisons with her previous holiday palette, and at the end, obviously, whether I thought this palette was worth the money. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's get into the packaging first. So this is what the palette looks like. This is the outer cardboard packaging. This is the palette itself. You can see the outer packaging is just a mirror of the actual palette itself, and when you turn it over, the palette itself has got all of the shade names on the back, and in terms of the cardboard packaging, it's got all of the ingredients, and this is an 18-month shelf life, and all of it was made in Italy. So although I'm calling it an eyeshadow palette, it's technically an artistry palette because quite a lot of the shades in here are pigments that haven't been deemed safe around the eyes by the FDA. Although I've never had any problems, so I just use it around the eyes nonetheless. It doesn't really cause me any issues. So when you open up the palette, this is what it looks like. It's got 3 rows of 6. There's a little strap that keeps it open. So when you're working on your makeup, you keep it open at your vanity. Ooh. Open at your vanity, and you can see what you're doing, or you're just holding it by hand so you can see what you're doing. I'm not sure if I'm that bothered by it. I know some people really hate it and cut the straps open, but honestly, I'm not that bothered either way. And in terms of the price, so her £18 holiday eyeshadow palettes or artistry palettes have always been £76, but you always have that 10% discount code, which is like advertised by YouTubers everywhere, and if you sign up to a mailing list you get that code as well. So with the code I got it for £68.40, and it came really quickly within a week, which I was really sort of surprised at, because the last time I ordered this holiday palette, it took like a week for it to even ship, but this time round it took less than a week for it to actually arrive here, so I was really pleased with that. So before we actually get into the swatches, I do just want to compare it with the last 2 holiday palettes that she released. So this is her 3rd one. This one is from the year before, which is called the Celestial Odyssey palette, and you can see this has a red base, neon pink around the center, and the gold pattern is slightly different. And in terms of size, you can see that the red one is slightly longer in length, but the pink one is just slightly wider, and they are of equal thickness. They are quite heavy, even though it is cardboard packaging. They do feel quite bulky. I think that's partly to do with the mirror. And in terms of the weight, I looked at it, and actually the net weight on this palette from last year is 0.69 ounce, but this one has 0.8 ounce. So it looks like that maybe we are getting a little bit more eyeshadow in this palette. But to be honest, I think everyone feels that they rather have less product, because let's be honest, who's gonna hit pan? Also, who's gonna hit pan on these colors? Because these are some, you know, like very bright colors, and it's not exactly your everyday eyeshadow palette either. Okay, so let's get into swatches of this palette. So this palette has 18 shades, and during the promotions, she classified 3 different tones. So these 2 columns are neutral, then the next 2 are cool, and then the last 2 are warm. So I'll swatch them by column, and she also said there are 4 different textures in this palette. So highlighting, structure builders, gleaming metallics, and satin frost. So when I swatch each shade, I'll mention which texture they are as well. So I feel like that's almost more helpful than just going via how the palette is organized. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do first of all is swatch the matte shades in the neutral columns. So we're gonna go first with Desert Divinity, and we've got Nightfall here, and then we've got the matte green, which is called Altered State. So these are all velvety mattes, which she classifies as structure builders on her website. So we've got Desert Divinity, the lightest brown in the palette. Then we've got Nightfall. You can see definitely deeper. And Desert Divinity, it's almost got that slightly mauvey undertone. And we've got Altered State, which is just a really true matte green. So I wore these two shades yesterday and I'm wearing the matte green in the center of my eyelid. All of these mattes blend out very easily, which is, you know, what you would expect from Pat McGrath. So then we've got the other three metallic shades. So this shade is Cosmic Champagne, which she says is a highlighting shade. And this shade here is Bronze Infatuation, which is a gleaming metallic texture. And then we've got Guilty Opulence, which is a satin frost. So all of these three shades are actually different textures. So we've got Cosmic Champagne, first of all, very shiny. Bronze Infatuation, very pretty. And Guilty Opulence, which is antique gold. So all of the metallic shades feel very silky, very creamy on the back of my hand, really no issues there. And yesterday I wore this all over my lid, this in the outer corner, and this in a inner 2/3 of my eyelid, and it was just the easiest kind of neutral look that you can create with this palette, to be honest. And I really like this shade, which was Bronze Infatuation. I'll just show you in the palette again what that shade was. So this one, it was super sparkly. I always test whether an eyeshadow is sparkly in my bathroom because for some reason the lighting in my bathroom just makes the sparkling eyeshadow come to life. It looks just kind of really diamondy, like kind of like a disco ball, and honestly that shade did that for me, so I'm really pleased. Right, so let's go into the next 6 shades. So let's go into the cool toned, and I'm wearing a lot of those cool tone shades on my eyes right now, but let's get into the swatches. So we've got Nocturnal Navy, got Fabulosity, and Violet Vixen. Okay, so this is Nocturnal Navy, Fabulosity, and Violet Vixen. So again, these are all mattes, and you can see these 3 shades do actually look quite different as well, because I don't know, I feel like sometimes purples can look similar, but you can see that this is really more of a fuchsia, this is like a true purple, and obviously this is a navy. So I'm glad there's a really good differentiation between these colorful shades. And in terms of what I'm wearing on my eyes, I'm wearing Nocturnal Navy over Violet Vixen on the outer corner, and in the corner is Fabulosity. And again, they just blended out super easily, really had no issues with them at all. And then if we go into the metallic shades in the row now, so we've got Lunar Lavender, which again is what she classified as the highlighting shade. So the highlighting shades are super beamy, very bright, obviously light in tone to highlight. And then we've got Eternal Amour, which is the gleaming metallics formula. And then lastly, we have Aquarian Dream, which is a Satin Frost. So this is Lunar Lavender. But honestly, if you compare Lunar Lavender to Cosmic Champagne, the other highlighting shade, it's actually not quite as bright, and it feels a tiny bit more chalky, to be honest. Then we have Eternal Amour, which is in the same finishing as the Bronze Infatuation shade. And then we have Aquarian Dream, so Satin Frost. So the Satin Frost, they feel quite creamy. I haven't worn this shade yet, Eternal Amour, so I can't testify as to how kind of sparkly and glitzy it is, but I do think when you look at it and compare these two, they do have that similar sparkly finish. The only shade I'm not quite impressed by is Lunar Lavender. I did put Lunar Lavender in the inner corner on top of Fabulosity, and you can sort of see it here. And I did try to wet it as well to get a better payoff, but honestly it didn't really work. It could be because of the brush I was using. I'm not gonna lie, I used a little pointy brush because rather than a flat brush. But I wasn't that impressed with the payoff, and like I said, swatching it, it does feel a little bit chalky. An Aquarian Dream, I used it on a flat brush, this one, and you can see it in, I've sort of here kind of lined my eyes with it. So Aquarian Dream performed absolutely fine, but I feel like the first dud in the palette that I've tried is Lunar Lavender. Okay, so let's get into the last 6 shades, and finally we have the warm tones. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm gonna be wearing these mattes very often. I don't think it's very flattering for me, but let's swatch them anyway. So we've got the shade Auburn Allure, Flame Fatale, and Venetian Peony. Oh, sorry. This is Venetian Peony. I swatched the wrong finger. And then we've got Flame Fatale, and then we've got Auburn Allure. So in terms of wearability, Auburn Allure is kind of something that you can perhaps wear every day, although it is quite, you know, it's got a really obvious red tone to it. So I think on, you know, different skin tone, this could be an everyday shade, but otherwise I feel like the only 2 matte everyday shades are these 2 from the neutral columns. This shade didn't swatch that well, but this is Venetian Peony. What I did with Venetian Peony is kind of almost use it as a transition shade to blend all of the colours together. And to be honest, you can't quite tell it's there, but that's kind of what I wanted the effect to be anyway. So I haven't really tried to pack this colour on. I'm just gonna swatch it again to see if I can add a little bit more impact here. Yeah, here we go. That's a little bit better. So Venetian Peony. So, and then obviously we've got the same metallic and the way they're grouped again. So this one here again is the Satin Frost, and then again we've got the Gleaming Metallic, and we've got the highlighting shade. So the highlighting shade here is called Golden Angelica. So this is Golden Angelica, and then Heavenly Bronze, and then this one is Starlit Copper. So Golden Angelica, highlight shade, very creamy, very nice. And then we've got Heavenly Bronze, Gleaming Metallic, and you can tell that it's just slightly, there's something to it, right? When you compare these 2 shades, that there's just a little bit of something extra in these gleaming metallics. And then lastly, we've got the Satin Frost shade of Starlit Copper. So this is the eyeshadow palette. So as you can see, I feel like this is her most colourful palette yet, right? You have all of these pops of purple, green, pink, and red, which you just don't get in her other holiday palettes, even though her holiday palettes are sort of more out there shades. But I feel like just somehow this looks more wearable. And same here from last year. You know, these shades just look more wearable because even though they're sort of peachy, they're just a little bit more neutral, a little bit less out there. And I feel like the new Celestial Nirvana palette is almost a rainbow palette. You just don't have a bright yellow, but you know, you've got the red, you've got the green, you've got the purple, you've got the blue. So this is like, yeah, this is a rainbow palette to me, to be honest. And you've got some more neutral metallics in the mix. The velvety matte finishes, the structure builders, they're all pretty nice. I've tried most of them. The only shade that I haven't tried is these 2, okay? Honestly, I don't know how I'm gonna wear this. This is like a proper red. It's very, I think it's a difficult color to pull off. And obviously this is just kind of like a warm brown. which, you know, you can get in other palettes, but this is a very, very reddish brown. I don't expect them to perform differently to the other mattes I've tried. And in terms of the highlighting shades, they feel creamy. Really, they're like just like classic Pat McGrath. The only one that I'm disappointed by is this one. It's a little bit chalky. And in terms of the gleaming metallics finishes, I already said the shade here is fantastic. It is so sparkly. It's almost like the finish of her special shades. So I think these three are probably like the best shades of the Eyeshadow palette. And then lastly, you've got these three here, which are satin frost finish. They are nice metallic eyeshadows as well. Use blue, can't complain. Antique gold, classic Pat McGrath shadow, and Starlit Copper as well, which is a very common sort of Pat McGrath shade, and she does them very well. So there's no, you know, like complaint about quality. I'm just gonna sort of swatch the ones that I think kind of look similar from the previous eyeshadow palettes and do a little comparison. So from last year, in terms of the mattes, right, you've got this pinky shade and this pinky shade, but I don't think they will look similar to the mattes she's got here. So this shade looks similar to the reddish brown from the new palette, which is this shade here, Satin Sunset from last year. Looks quite similar to Auburn Allure. And then the other pink, it's got that more coral pop, which I swatched, was this colour. It's called Electric. Yeah, Electric here. But yeah, actually I'm quite surprised that I've managed to find stuff of a similar tone, because I really wasn't expecting to find anything that similar. And in terms of the other pinky mattes from the first release, Pale Pink, so this plummy colour, let's see. So the Pale Pink I've just put here. Okay, so obviously this is much more muted, much more mauvey, much more wearable than Venetian, whatever it's called. And then this one here, swatch. Okay, so definitely more purple. So very different. And obviously we got the matte browns as well. We've got this shade here, Sunrose Amber, and this shade here, which is Nocturne. So this is Sunrose Amber. That looks not that similar, definitely warmer. And this one here, this looks more cool toned compared to last year's brown. And then the only brown that we have from the first holiday release is this shade here, which is Major Mahogany. And obviously that is much more warm, much warmer. And if I swatch it here, and if you compare with the red, it's much, you know, it's a lot more brown, but when you compare the shade with the brown, it's a lot more red. And honestly, I feel like, you know, she always has these champagne shades, you know, they're never gonna go away. So this is a classic champagne shade from last year's palette. And if I'm swatching it next to this one, so that's a little bit more taupey, slightly less harsh, perhaps less blingy than this. Not less blingy, but kind of less pale compared to this year's shade. I think this shade is actually more wearable from last year, and that shade was called Heavenly Body. And one of the shades that I really loved from last year is called Galactic Glow. It's kind of like, it's almost got a duochrome effect to it. I don't know if you can tell on my finger, but it's got a slightly kind of pink gold shift. So if I compare it to this shade, ooh, it's also very crumbly. So I do think these two are very similar. I think this got a slightly different finish. This one is slightly kind of sparklier, and this one definitely does have pink base with gold shift to it. Not sure if you can tell. Really don't think you can tell, but yeah. And we've almost got a very similar shade in the first year palette actually, which is Cosmic. So this is also kind of a shifty one. Can you see that? On my finger is a lot more obvious. And this is Cosmic from the first ever holiday release. Pretty. So similar-ish shades there. And a couple shades I do want to compare is this copper shade right at the end. So we've got this copper shade, which is Corrupt Copper. And we've got these two copper shades. This one, Bronze. And then I guess this one here as well, which is Bronze Nebula. So these are the three on my finger. And if I just sort of swatch them here. Okay. So honestly, like these three are super similar, but this shade here is from last year, right? Corrupt Copper. And Corrupt Copper is so beautiful. It's almost orange, whereas this you can see is definitely more red. And these two are sort of more true bronzy colors. And this from this year is a lot lighter compared to these two. And there is actually, so there's a shade here from last year's palette, which is kind of like a pale lavender highlighter shade. It's called Lunar Haze, and I'm just gonna put it next to the shade here from this year. So Lunar Haze again feels chalky, but it's got more of a pewter, I think it's less violet, more sort of like pewter silvery shade, whereas this color from this year is really trying to go for that icy blue. So even though they look quite similar in pan, they actually swatch very differently. I feel like I could keep swatching these shades all day, but I don't think we're gonna get anywhere. So obviously she's got the antique gold from this year, and she does a lot of golds in her eyeshadow palette, but I can't actually see a gold that will compare. But just for the sake of it, I will swatch the gold from last year's palette called Gold Galaxy. And we've got a gold here as well, which is called Gold Standard. So you can see these are definitely more sort of that yellow gold, whereas this is a more of an antique gold. So that's from the first year, and this is from last year. So the last year, I feel like last year's quality is so good. Just swatching them with my fingers now and comparing, I do actually feel maybe last year's eyeshadow quality is a touch creamier with the metallics, and even the velvet shades do have really, really strong payoff. The velvety matte shades really have strong payoff. Okay, so I think that is everything I'm gonna fit on my arm, to be honest, and I'm pretty sure these are all of the comparable shades that I can find from the previous two holiday palettes. Right, so in summary, this eyeshadow palette, my first impression, honestly, is this is a very good eyeshadow palette. It's great for value because you know you get 18 eyeshadows for £76, or with a 10% discount, £68.40, whereas her traditional big £12 palettes with a black lacquer is £100 plus. So it's good for your value from that point of view. But then actually comparing it with the two previous palettes, I almost feel like the quality of these two palettes somehow is just slightly better than this one. I mean, this is still a good eyeshadow palette, and you can see from my eye look, you know, I managed to blend everything, created, you know, a very nice look with it. But yeah, but for some reason, I can't quite put my finger on it. But I feel like this, in terms of quality, it's just not quite as good. It just a smidgen, just a smidgen. And in terms of a color story, it's very, very out there for Pat McGrath. You know, she keeps releasing those rose-toned eyeshadow palettes that look the same. Frankly, I'm not interested in buying any more of her black lacquer Pat McGrath big mothership palettes because I think they look the same. So I feel like this is like a breath of fresh air. So I think this is cool from that point of view. But then if you're someone who is not gonna wear these crazy purpley pink shades, then at the end of the day, it's not an eyeshadow palette that is worth buying, especially if you had the previous two palettes, you know, like the classic shades, the bronze and the super sparkly metallics. They're already in here somewhere, or like your other eyeshadow collection, so I don't really think you need to get this. I think I just quite like collecting her limited edition holiday palettes because I feel like they're quite different. So I don't regret buying this palette, but in terms of wearability, definitely the other two palettes are more wearable for the everyday person. But if you're like someone who, likes experimenting, then definitely this palette is for you. So yeah, that is my thoughts. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, then please like, comment and subscribe. That will really help me out, and I shall leave you with the swatch of this arm. Alright, bye.